Well, hi all. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on stress management. I'm hoping that you are all safe and well. The IBT recognizes that COVID-19 has presented many new challenges and situations that can cause stress to you and your family. And we are fortunate enough to have Gretchen Grindle, who has presented a variety of workshops at the IBT Women's Conferences for a number of years. And she's offered to help us now in our time of need. Gretchen has been practicing in the mental health field for 28 years. As a licensed professional counselor in Virginia, she has served as an EAP counselor for organizations such as Value Options, Menninger, ANOVA, and the National Science Foundation. In addition to direct client care, she has presented on various topics such as grief, parenting, and change management. She has used her certificate in leadership coaching from the George Washington University to consult with managers and organizations. She is also trained in and provides critical incident debriefings for organizations, even helping organizations through trauma after 9/11. Ms. Grindle has been managing her private practice for 17 years and enjoys using her expertise to meet the needs and address the challenges of individuals and organizations. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Gretchen Grindle. Gretchen, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks very much, Kristen. And thanks, everybody. I'm so glad to be able to be here today and to be able to talk to you about stress management in this very trying and unusual time that we're all facing. My goal today is to just talk a little bit about what I think some of the things are that people might be feeling and experiencing. And then I have 10 takeaways that I'm hoping to give to you as things that you can actually try or do or implement to help and to see if they can support you through this really unprecedented time. There's lots of resources out there. There's lots of things that you can see in the media about how to manage and how to take care of yourself. A lot of them have really good information. Some of it can seem overwhelming. So in the conversations that I've been having with people in my practice, with the things that I'm actually going through myself, because this is one of those unusual circumstances where I'm going through the same thing everyone else is going through, I've culled together these 10 that I think are really important and maybe not things that you're seeing everywhere else in the media and other places. So I hope that's what your expectations were for today. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation because, again, we're just going to go through 10 items. I'm going to spend a little bit more time expanding on some of the 10 than others, but hopefully this is just going to be a nice way to pace through some ways that you can implement some changes or some new practices and take those away with you and see if they're helpful. So I'd like to just get started by talking a little bit about what this experience is like for people. I think most people have heard of the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think there's a lot of information in the media about post-traumatic stress disorder. What's different about what's going on right now is that there's no post to it yet. We are in the middle of something that is in some ways traumatic for everybody. So I think it's important to think about how to take care of ourselves, how to talk to ourselves, how to manage ourselves when we may be experiencing some trauma on an ongoing basis by this continuing situation, so that when we do reach the other side of this, wherever that is and whatever that might look like, we can do a little bit better job of having gotten some healing maybe under our belts already for the future that we're all looking forward to. So let's get started with our 10. Again, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on some of these than I am others, but and these are not in any particular order. So number one, I want you to think about how on a daily basis, how you can practice a combination of activity and rest every single day. So there's lots of suggestions about how to maintain an exercise routine and things like that. I'm not talking about like the regular exercise that you get just for your physical health. I'm talking about some activity that is related mostly to your mental health. And so in what we have found, and what the research has found when you're dealing with some trauma and stress, is about 10 to 15 minutes of something that gets your heart elevated every single day that you're going through something that is stressful or traumatic. So for a lot of us, that could be just a quick walk around outside. It could be putting on 2 or 3 of your favorite songs and dancing strenuously. It could be doing some jumping jacks. Whatever it is, we don't have to go to the gym to do it, but it is important to get some of that, that activity every single day. What it does is it actually brings down some of your cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. It can bring down some of your adrenaline levels as well if you're having some extra anxiety. So balancing the activity and balancing rest. I have found from talking to people through this situation that people are reporting feeling more tired than they would have expected to feel. That their regular life before this happened, where they were running errands and going and seeing people and taking care of a lot of different things, did not feel as exhausting as just being at home all the time. And it seems like it is, it doesn't seem to make any sense. So let me describe it like this a little bit. When something this stressful is happening, and when you're that much outside of your norm and your routine, it's like having your muscles be tense all day long. So you don't necessarily notice it, but it's there and it's draining. So the analogy I like to give is, if I gave you a soup can to hold in your hand, you could pick it up and it doesn't weigh a whole lot and it doesn't feel like it's that much of a burden. But if I asked you to hold that soup can for 12 hours, at the end of the day, your arm would be fatigued, your hand would be fatigued, or cramping, it would feel painful, it would feel like it was a burden. And so in some ways, this kind of stress that we're having is like the idea of holding a soup can all day long. It's just adding a degree or two more, in some cases a lot of degrees, but just if we feel like we're managing everything, there's still this level of extra anxiety that's going on. And so it is going to require more rest for us to have more rest. So, which is the transition into my number 2, which is make sure you're sleeping. So the idea of number 1 is to be balancing the activity and the rest, and to make sure that rest is a priority for yourself every day. And by that, I mean, now we're on to number 2. You should be giving yourself the opportunity to get 8 hours of sleep every single day. I cannot emphasize enough how important sleep is. There's a sleep expert who I quote all the time, who says that sleep is the Swiss Army knife of health. And that if you had the choice between exercising every day, taking care of your diet every day, and sleeping 8 hours every day, if you had to pick one, the one that's the most important to do is to sleep 8 hours every day. It's when our body cleans up waste from our cells inside our body. It's when our brains recharge serotonin, which is one of the neurotransmitters that makes us feel good. It is really critically important. So to that end, if you're having some trouble sleeping, one of the things that you can do is you can Google the phrase sleep hygiene. I could do a whole hour on sleep hygiene. I'm trying to get through some other tips today. So if you need some help with sleeping, you can Google sleep hygiene, and you will get tons of recommendations of ways to make sure that your room is at the right temperature, you have a bedtime routine to wind down, you're turning the blue light off on your devices, you're leaving devices behind, you're creating a good environment for sleep. And then if needed, there are also things that you can go on to YouTube, and you can Google sleep meditations. So during this stressful time, if one of the issues that you have is how to get your brain to wind down a little bit at night, there are a tremendous number of free sleep meditations that are available on YouTube, and you can just go ahead and search that. You can find ones that are 5 minutes long, 10 minutes long. There's none that I specifically recommend because it is very personalized to everybody, but you can give a couple of those, you can give those a try and see if that helps you along with your sleep. If not, this is a conversation that's important enough to have with your doctor. Almost all primary care physicians are doing telehealth these days, and this is an easy thing to talk about with a primary care physician via telehealth. They may have some recommendations about some lifestyle changes for you, or some over-the-counter things to try for a short term, or if you need to, some prescription. This is how important I think this is. This is how important I want you to think about this. 8 hours of sleep a night, or the opportunity to have 8 hours of sleep a night. The very minimum really is 7. A lot of people want it to be 6 or 6.5. It really isn't. 7 should be the minimum. 8 is what's really ideal. So if this is something that you are struggling with, again, sleep hygiene, you can look up some sleep meditations. And if it is still an issue for you, I would encourage you very strongly to talk to your primary care physician. All right. So that's number 2. Number 3 is, I think, the idea of making sure that we are separating work from home. In this unprecedented time when so many of us are now, our homes have now become our workplaces. It feels like it's harder, I think, to set good boundaries. We feel like work is accessible to us all the time, and then work also has access to our home life all the time. I'm sitting here in my dining room, as you can see in the background, and so this is not a place where I ever saw clients or did presentations from again, before, and so it does have a strange feel to be bringing work into the home. And then at the same time, when we're at home and doing our work, I think sometimes it becomes hard to turn it off because there's no external, deadlines, like, okay, here's the time to go pick up the kids, or here's the time that I'm leaving because I'm meeting my spouse or some friends for a drink or something like that. So I think it's important to try to implement some boundaries for yourself on work. And that may mean different things for different people. But for some of the things that I suggest are having a place in your home, if you have the space for it, a place in your home that is dedicated to just work for right now, so that it does feel like there's a little bit of separation from the rest of your home life. And that means sometimes turning off computers, putting down your phones and things like that, that are related to just your job, if that's something that's possible for you. The other thing to do is to try to implement a schedule so that you are telling yourself at a certain point in the day, this is the end of my work day. The example I've been giving is something my husband and I have instituted in the house is we have what we call our evening commute, because neither of us are actually going to a job right now. When we end our day, when we end our work days and turn our computers off and shut the work day out, we will go outside and take a lap or two around the block. And it just kind of gives this mental separation between, like, okay, that part of the day is done, and now this part of the day or afternoon or evening is happening, where this is our personal time, our family time. I think when the complications of taking care of dependent children or taking care of older parents and trying to manage a household where you're not leaving anymore, it feels like, well, okay, maybe I'll just get a little bit of work in here because I'm going to be doing this household thing later. And then it just feels like nothing is ever done. You're always doing everything. And that can be very overwhelming and different. And so thinking about implementing ways to separate church from home, I think is another good practice during this time. So that's number 3. Number 4, and I say this when I do the presentations for stress management, and everywhere I go, and I get a whole lot of pushback about it, but I'm very firm about this. Absolutely, positively, do not watch television news. I don't care which channels you watch. I don't care what your political bent is. When things are stressful, the last thing you need is to watch television news. I'm not telling you to be uninformed. There are a tremendous number of online sources for news that are all through the spectrum of whatever your political bent is. The reason I say no television news is because when you turn on the television news, you now have zero control about the content that's coming at you. So it's 6 o'clock, you turn on whatever your favorite channel is, and then they just start talking at you about whatever they think is the most important thing that happened that day, or the thing that they think is the most newsworthy or sensational or whatever it is. And then you just start getting bombarded by all this stuff. And it really is too much for our brains to take in. It just is not a good way to consume information whatsoever. It is not entertaining, and it's not a good way to consume information. It really is not good for your mental health. I have had so many people say to me, I resisted you, Gretchen. I resisted it. And then they come back and say, I cannot believe how much stress watching the evening news was causing me. I cannot believe how much better my life feels, how much more in control I feel. And I feel as equally informed as I get my news sources from something I have complete control over, which is to scroll through, or to have paper newspapers, or to have online sources where you're looking at news, and you can pick and choose exactly what you're ready for. For me, a good example is if I've had a really difficult day in dealing with clients and I've been talking to people with a lot of trauma, and then I turn on the television news and it just happens to be a human interest story at that moment about somebody who's going through something horrible. As nice as it is that there's human interest stories, that's the last thing I needed at the end of my day. And I just gave over control of the things that are coming into my life by turning on the television at that point. So again, I can't see any of you in person. When I do this in person, I see a lot of faces say like, that's not good, but just try it. If you could just try a day or two and turning the news off and looking at your news somewhere else and check in on yourself and see how you feel, just as an experiment, right? What do you got to lose? So that's number 4, no television news. Number 5, is trying something new or something that's novel. And by novel, I mean just different for you. And this doesn't have to be anything super complicated. This doesn't have to be like you have to learn how to knit or you have to start woodworking or something like that. In particular, those supplies or getting supplies is hard to do these days. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people is this kind of overall malaise of just, everything feels like it's just blending into, one day, 1 week, 1 month. There doesn't seem to be any variety. When you are out and about in the world, you have a whole lot of variety that you're dealing with. And so when you're just in the house or, in one place for a long time, things get to be a little bit predictable and monotonous. And actually, brains really like novelty. It's one of the ways that we stay sharp as we age. It's one of the ways that we can get engaged in something that's healthy. If you're not giving your brain something healthy to do, sometimes it will go in directions that are more difficult, like it will start to worry or start to picture terrible outcomes in this situation. And so it's better to introduce a little bit of novelty. And again, I mean really simple, like learning a new card game or turning on YouTube and learning how to do a new dance or something like that that's physical, because that would kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because you'd be doing something active and then something new. Or looking at like some of the content that's now for free. I mean, my husband and I started watching opera because that's new and novel and interesting. So something that you wouldn't normally do to introduce that into your life is a way to say, oh, you know what, when I look back on this last week and I say, oh, how was this last week? I can say to myself, oh, you know what, I learned this thing or I did this new thing. It wasn't just these long stretches of time that are kind of blurring all into one another at this point. So something novel, something new. All right, so we're halfway through. Those are our first 5. Number 6, this is an easy one. Take time to laugh every single day. So if you don't have anybody funny in your household, if you don't have any funny TV shows that you like to watch, or funny comedy routines, whatever, there's lots of comedy available on TV and on streaming and on the radio and on satellite radio and things like that. Laughter is just a natural part of the human experience. I mean, people in all cultures all across the world, laughter is something like crying. Laughter is something that's common, and it is a kind of our brains like laughter too. It releases a lot of good hormones and good feelings, and that kind of last and linger. And if you think about how you feel after you've had a really good hard laugh, that kind of release and that kind of sense of that comes over you, that's a really nice thing to have right now. And you can manufacture that every single day. what I tell people all the time is if you don't have any of these other TV shows or anything that makes you laugh, if you just would Google or go on YouTube and type in babies laughing, it's like we are all programmed that is a lot of cuteness, and when babies laugh, it's almost impossible to not laugh along with them. So if you've had a rough day, if you need a little bit of time to do something that is going to change your brain chemistry a little bit, this is a great tool to have. And it's usually once you identify something for yourself that makes you laugh, you can even go back to the same thing over and over again if it makes you laugh. But it is something to think about and be deliberate about, getting into the practice of doing it at least once a day. And hopefully it just comes up spontaneously for you for some other reason. But if you get to the end of the day and you say like, you know what, I haven't laughed or smiled a lot all day, go ahead and do it. Believe me, trust me, it's a really good practice to get into. So that was an easy one. The next couple that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to spend a little bit more time with each one as we go through it, because they're a little bit more esoteric, a little bit more about how you think and process things. So number 7 is really important. It's the idea of not comparing yourself to anyone else. And in this really unprecedented time, I think it's more important than ever before. I heard a great analogy or read it online somewhere, is that we are all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. And I can find somebody whose boat is better than mine, and I can find somebody whose boat is worse than mine. And if you think about it, probably at almost every point in your life, you could identify somebody who's better off than you and somebody who's worse off than you. So what does it really do? How does it really help? How does it really give you any kind of comfort or support, or make you feel better or make you feel worse? It really, if you pull back and look at the idea of comparing yourself to other people or other situations, it usually leads to you feeling worse, even if you're telling yourself that you can see how you have some advantages that other people might not have. Then if you have other kinds of negative feelings going on, then you feel like you shouldn't have those, and what did this serve, and how did this help you to go through this whole comparison process? So if you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, just give yourself a small reminder that it's easy to find somebody at any point that's better off and worse off. And so if you're always in the middle somewhere, there's somebody better off and worse off, it really isn't useful at all to compare yourself to anybody else. So I hope that made sense with that explanation. And it leads into my next one, which number 8, which is accept all feelings as they come. I think there are those of us, and I can talk about myself here, I have a lot to be grateful for. I feel very, very grateful in this moment about, my access to food and shelter, my ability to still do my job and to not have to worry about that financially, that I have a husband who is keeping me company, and I feel grateful for a lot of things. And I still feel scared. There are still, this existential threat that we're all facing about illness and loss is there for us, and we're not living our normal lives, and it's very strange and it's very unsettling. So my gratitude does not cancel out my worry. So when I say that what I want you to do is practice accepting all feelings, that means that I can be grateful and be worried at the same time. And so if I find myself wandering into worry or thinking about worry too much, I try a different practice to bring myself back from that, which I am going to talk about in a second. The practice that doesn't work well is to say things to myself like, why are you so worried about this? You should be more grateful. You should. Should is a very dangerous word. I don't like using the word should very much at all. But it's not a way to say to yourself something more along the lines of course I'm worried. This is a strange and unprecedented time. Of course I have some feelings of fear and anxiety. That's perfectly natural. And using the word and not but, and I do have a lot of things that I'm grateful for too. So it's okay for me to have all those feelings at the same time. They're all valid, they're all real, they do not cancel each other out. If we start to talk to ourselves about how we should let these positive feelings cancel out our negative feelings, we just end up in this conflict, and it doesn't really bring us a lot of comfort or peace or reduction in stress. So I hope that explanation made sense too for this number 8, accept all feelings. So I'm gonna use that to move into number 9, which is what happens when we find ourselves maybe struggling with some of these anxious or worrisome feelings, and we're getting caught in the loop with those things. So my suggestion, my number 9 comment is, or suggestion is, to stay present. Okay, so it's easy to say stay present. It's very popular to say stay present. So what does it really, really mean to stay present? For me, what it means to stay present is that if I find myself speculating, going off into these different pictures about these what if scenarios. Some of them may be just kind of intellectual, when will this end kind of thing. But more often when I get caught in these, they are anxious thoughts, the what ifs about this unknown future and the negative things and the worries that I have. And if I let myself continue to dwell in those places that are imaginary and in the future, I can paint a very compelling, negative, worrisome, fearful, painful picture for myself that makes me feel really bad really fast, right? So when I say stay present, what I mean is that if I catch myself, so number 1, that's going to happen. Those thoughts are going to happen. That's just a natural part of people managing their world. So every once in a while, I will have these what if thoughts where I go off into the future in some kind of in particular in some kind of negative way. And when that happens, I catch myself and say, oh, look, you have wandered into some speculative future that actually hasn't happened yet. It's making you feel really bad. So it would be better to just come back to the present, be right here where you are, and remind yourself that where you are right now is safe and comfortable. Now, I know there are a portion of people who do not live in a place that is safe, and that is a real concern. That's not a concern that I can manage right now talking to you. So I'm going to assume that when you come back to your present, that you're in a place that is comfortable and content and safe. And so when I find myself wandering into these speculative places, I have to remind myself gently and lovingly, Gretchen, you are in a future that has not happened yet, and it really does make you feel bad to think about it. Let's come back to the present. And then if that kind of statement, just kind of reminding myself gently and lovingly to come back to the present, if that doesn't help me shift back to the present, there are 3 things that I want to suggest that you can do. Number 1 is something that's called 4-7-8 breathing. So you set a timer on your phone or wherever for 2 minutes. And for 2 minutes, you're going to do 4-7-8 breathing. And what that means is you inhale to a count of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it for a count of 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you exhale for a count of 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So for those 2 minutes, all you are going to do is count as you breathe. And if you are in a highly anxious state, it may be very hard to hold that 7. That's the least important part of the 3 parts. So the 4 and the 8, that you are that you are exhaling twice as long as you are inhaling is what's important. Because when we get anxious, we hyperventilate and we actually get too much oxygen. We're gulping, like that, gulping air in. So when you're 4-7-8 breathing, you're taking air in, you're holding it in your lungs, and then you're blowing it back out. And it feels, and if you do it for 2 minutes, believe me, you will feel a lot better. And because you're focused on your breathing, because your body is settling down a little bit, all the kind of adrenaline and all the cortisol starts to settle down, it becomes harder to think about that terrible thing that I was speculating about, because now I've given myself a new task and my body is actually settling down. So to bring yourself back to the present, try 4-7-8 breathing, number 1. Number 2, if you're very, very anxious, you can set your timer for 30 seconds and you can shake your arms as hard as you possibly can, like that. Just shake them, shake them, shake them, shake them. And what that does is, if you practice that, or you do that just for 30 seconds, and then when you put your arms down, it completely shifts all the blood flow in your body, because you've done this activity. You get your heart rate up just a little bit, teeny tiny bit, but now all the blood flow has changed. And then when you stop, you just kind of feel this resettling of your whole body. And so again, that's a way to give yourself a task to do, and it works on some of the adrenaline and works on some of the stress, and then it brings you back to the present. And then you have a sensation that actually feels calming, and it's easier to just stay in the present. So that's number 2. Number 3, if you don't have access or time to do the 30 seconds of shaking it off or the 2 minutes of breathing, one of the common exercises for grounding or being in the present is to engage in your environment with all of your senses. So if I'm being present right now, what I'm hearing is my neighbor mowing his lawn. What I'm seeing is my own face in this presentation that I'm doing. What I'm smelling is some cooking from the kitchen that my husband did earlier. And what I'm feeling is the table underneath my hands. I have just kind of grounded myself with all 5 senses, and then I'm back into the present of what's going on. Taste, I forgot. Taste. I'm tasting water. So by using those 5 senses, I have brought myself physically and emotionally back into the present. So those are the 3 techniques that I'm recommending for the idea of trying to stay present. So, which was number 9. So now this is my last one, number 10, and it relates to number 9 in the sense that one of the most important things you can do is practice kindness right now. And I mean kindness to others and kindness to yourself. So kindness to others is trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Right now, it's easy to get caught up in our own experience about what we're going through. It's understandable. It's completely relatable. Sometimes we get short with other people in our lives because we're frustrated or we're angry or we're stressed out. I would like you to just take a moment to take a breath when you find yourself doing that, and think about being kind to the people around you, giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. Again, back to the same storm, different boat analogy. Your boat may be different from another person who's living in your house. Their boat may be different from yours. And so remembering that everybody is experiencing this thing differently, and we're all trying to make the best of a difficult situation, that we are all trying to manage ourselves in an unprecedented time. So practicing kindness to other people by giving them the benefit of the doubt, using kind words throughout the day, thinking positive thoughts about other people in your life and in your neighborhood and in the world if you can, and just trying to practice some kindness to others. Even just as important as practicing kindness to others is to be practicing kindness to yourself. This is a really difficult time. And there are all kinds of things out in in social media about how, everybody who's in quarantine should be taking all this time to, set all these goals and try all these new, get perfectly fit now and, do all these things that have been on their list that they haven't done, and make sure their house is clean and make sure there's all these other tasks and set all these goals. And, if I hear one more time that, Shakespeare wrote King Lear while he was in quarantine, I'm not Shakespeare. You're not Shakespeare. It's not something that is kind to expect of ourselves or other people, that during this stressful and unprecedented time that we're going to do something extraordinary. If we do, fantastic, great. If that's you, great, that's fantastic. To expect that that's you, or to, look at other people on social media and see that they're doing something, which they're probably not, by the way, and then feel bad about yourself, that's just not very kind at all. And if you find that you're worrying and, projecting all these negative things and into the future, and you're having a hard time, with that, you have to kindly, very kindly say to yourself, okay, that makes sense that you're doing that. We have a tool now that Gretchen taught us about. We're going to try. We're going to move back to the present. We're going to try to stay focused on the present because the future is uncertain in every direction. It's uncertain. So when I'm thinking about how I'm just projecting all these negative things in the future, that's not very kind. The future has a lot of different directions it could go into. I don't find myself dwelling on all the positive things that might happen in the future. It's not very kind to just project that there's just one terrible thing that's going to have one outcome and it's going to be terrible. So the idea of practicing kindness to yourself is reminding yourself that you are just like everybody else going through some struggles. You should be talking gently to yourself. You should not have unreasonable expectations of yourself, regardless of what Shakespeare or social media is telling you you should do. And you should work really hard to make sure that you are being as kind in your self-talk as you can. I often in therapy, I'll ask people to pay attention to what their self-talk sounds like over the course of the day. And the thing I hear back from most people is, I was nastier. The language I used, the way I talk to myself is a way I would never talk to anybody else in the world. And so I try to remind people all the time that they deserve to be treated lovingly, just like you treat the people in your life whom you love. So if you're good at treating people in your life in a loving way, then you deserve to be treated the same. You're not exceptional. You don't get a pass. You're the same as everybody else. So if kindness is what everybody deserves, kindness is what you deserve too. And so being conscious and conscientious about how you talk to yourself, in particular in a difficult and stressful time, is really important. So I encourage people to be as kind and loving to themselves as a practice as they can be, as they like to be for other people in their life. So I want to kind of wrap up by saying that talking about these things is really important to do. Talking about it with people you love and people you're close to, talking about it with friends, just talking about this whole range of feelings that is happening, and trying again to be kind and to be thoughtful and conscientious to everybody, including yourself. Practice kindness for yourself, and remember that all of this is a practice. So I've just listed these 10 things for you to think about and to maybe try and implement in your life. But just like everything else, it's a practice. That means the first time you do it, it might not work. The second time you do it, it might not work. You may have to tweak it a little bit and have it be a little bit different from what I've suggested for you. I just want you to think about the idea that there are some practices that you can try in a loving, kind, gentle way with yourself that may help you manage some of this stress of this unprecedented time. So I hope these 10 things were very helpful. I hope that you can try some of them, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get to talk to you today. So thank you very much. Kristen?